Chapter 1. The hum of Earth's defense systems was a constant, a low, reassuring vibration that only the most sensitive ears could hear. Reyna Ford stood in the command center, watching the vast expanse of space on the monitors before her. The stars, distant and cold, felt like a cruel reminder of how small humanity was in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Yet here they were, on the cusp of something big, something dangerous. A warning flickered across the main screen, breaking her reverie. It was encrypted. She pressed a few keys, her fingers tapping swiftly, before the message unfolded in front of her. The message was clear, and the words struck with cold precision. Earth's advances have not gone unnoticed. The Galactic Council has observed your progress. A decision will be made soon. Stand down or face consequences. Reyna's hand tightened around the armrest of her chair. She had expected this, but the weight of the words still settled heavily in her chest. The Galactic Council had always been watching, and now they were making their move. Earth had risen from the ashes of war, its people rebuilding, innovating, and daring to push the boundaries of what their species could achieve. They had even begun developing technologies that rivaled the most advanced races in the galaxy. But that had made them a target. The Council did not tolerate the growth of any species that might challenge their supremacy. "Is this a direct threat?" Reyna asked, her voice calm but sharp. She looked over her shoulder at Lieutenant Commander Lila Torres, who had been monitoring the transmission. Lila glanced up from her console, her expression tense. "It's a warning. A veiled one, but a warning nonetheless. No direct threats, but the tone says it all. The Council will act if we don't comply." Reyna's eyes narrowed. She had prepared for this day, knowing it was inevitable. But preparing and facing the reality were two very different things. She stood, her gaze never leaving the screen as she walked toward the window that overlooked Earth's defenses. The planet, once a war-torn wasteland, now stood proud beneath her. A testament to humanity's resilience, but also a target. "Prepare a secure line," Reyna ordered, her voice sharp. "I need to speak to General Tannen." Within moments, the holographic display before her shifted, and the familiar image of General Marcus Tannen appeared, his face hard and scarred from years of service. "Reyna," he said, his deep voice tinged with concern. "I received the message." "You knew it was coming," she replied, her tone steady. "The Council won't tolerate Earth becoming a power in this galaxy. We've advanced too fast, and they'll move soon." Tannen's lips tightened into a thin line. "You're right. They've been watching us for decades. The Council can't stand the idea of a species like ours, unpredictable, adaptable, and free." Reyna nodded. "And they won't hesitate to strike if they feel threatened. We need to prepare." Tannen's hologram flickered, his fingers brushing over a digital map of Earth's defense grid. "We've been upgrading our weaponry for months. But there's only so much we can do. The Council's fleets are light years ahead of us. If they come in full force, we'll be outmatched." "Then we won't let them come in full force," Reyna replied. "We have to strike first. We can't afford to be reactive. We need to cripple their communication and reconnaissance systems before they can mobilize." Tannen looked doubtful. "You want to go on the offensive? With limited resources? That's a dangerous gamble, Reyna." "I'm not gambling. I'm ensuring our survival," she said, locking eyes with him. "If we wait for them to make a move, it'll be too late. We have to make them understand that Earth is not to be underestimated." A long pause hung in the air, the weight of their conversation sinking in. Then, Tannen nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'll mobilize the forces. You'll have what you need. But make no mistake, this could spark a war. A full-scale one." Reyna took a deep breath, the responsibility of her position heavy on her shoulders. "A war we can't afford to lose." As the hologram flickered out, Reyna turned to face the command center again, her mind already calculating the next steps. The Council was coming, but they had no idea what they were about to face. Earth's biggest advantage was that it was still underestimated. No one, not even the Galactic Council, truly understood humanity's potential to adapt, survive, and thrive under pressure. And Reyna was going to make sure they learned that lesson the hard way. The doors to the command center hissed open, and Lila stepped in, her face flushed with urgency. "Reyna, We've just intercepted another transmission. The Council is sending in a fleet. It's small, but it's a clear escalation. They're testing us. Reyna's eyes darkened. How soon? Within the hour. They'll be in range in 30 minutes. Without hesitation, Reyna issued orders to the fleet commanders, each of them taking their positions with a mix of fear and determination. Earth's forces were inexperienced, yes, but their will to survive was unmatched. Reyna would see to it that the Council never forgot that. She paused for a moment, looking at the fleet's positions on the map, then muttered to herself, "We're not just fighting for our survival. We're fighting for our place in this galaxy." As the countdown to the fleet's arrival ticked down, Reyna's resolve hardened. She would protect Earth, no matter the cost. The first wave of Council ships was already approaching, and she was ready. Ready to show the galaxy that Earth had a power all its own. Chapter 2. Reyna's fingers hovered above the holographic map, the soft blue light illuminating her focused face. The fleet was in position, but the reality of the situation was settling in like a weight on her chest. She had chosen to strike first, but now she had to convince Earth's divided leadership that this was their only option. The Council of Commanders and leaders around her, those who had been entrusted with Earth's future, sat in tense silence, their eyes darting to the maps and back to Reyna. The air was thick with uncertainty. "Everyone's waiting for you to tell them we're still not crazy for going on the offensive," said Lila, standing by the door, arms crossed tightly. Reyna exhaled sharply. She wasn't surprised by the concern. The Council was far more advanced than anything humanity had ever faced. Earth's fledgling fleet, despite its upgraded weapons, was still no match for their full military might. The only chance they had was to strike fast, crippling the Council's ability to respond. They couldn't afford hesitation. "I know what you're thinking," Reyna said, her voice calm but tinged with an undeniable urgency. "But we don't have a choice. If we wait, we die. If we move now, we have a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless." A voice from across the room interrupted her, a low, gravelly tone that belonged to General Marcus Tannen. "Reyna, I'm not doubting your ability to lead, but this is madness. We're talking about a war we might not survive." He was right. A part of her knew that what she was suggesting was reckless. A full-scale war with the Galactic Council would likely devastate Earth's already fragile position in the galaxy. But her mind refused to entertain the idea of surrender, or worse, submission. Earth had been through too much destruction, too much loss, just to bow to a higher power. Humanity had survived countless wars, internal strife, and collapse. To survive, they would have to act like it. "What if we don't survive?" Reyna asked, turning to face him. "What if we just let them come? What do we become then?" A few of the officers shifted uncomfortably. Tannen opened his mouth to reply, but Reyna raised her hand to silence him. She could see the doubt in his eyes, and she understood it. He had seen enough battles to know when the odds were insurmountable. But his experience wasn't enough to silence her resolve. "We'll fight," she said firmly. "The first strike will hit their comm satellites. If we can blind them, we have a window. After that, we'll hit their smaller vessels, anything we can cripple before the bulk of their forces arrive." Tannen leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He didn't argue. He knew there was no convincing Reyna once she had made up her mind. But that didn't mean the decision sat easily with him. "You're asking us to commit to a fight we may not win," he said quietly. Reyna's gaze hardened, but her voice remained steady. "I'm asking you to commit to Earth's future." Lila stepped forward, her eyes scanning the map as she studied the latest data. "We're ready for the initial strike. The fleet's in position, and we've got a window of 5 minutes to launch once we've neutralized their surveillance." Reyna nodded, glancing at the screen. The clock was ticking. 5 minutes wasn't a lot of time to make a decision. "We move in 5 minutes. Any questions?" She didn't wait for a response. There was no room for indecision. The officers gathered around her, each of them locking eyes with the others. They knew the risks, but they had no choice. As Earth's leaders, they had to stand by the decision, even if it meant the end of everything they had fought for. "General Tannen, prepare your forces for deployment," Reyna instructed. "Lieutenant Torres, give the signal to the fleet. It's go time." Tannen gave a sharp nod, but his face remained grim. Understood. Lila spoke up, her voice unwavering. Reyna, I have to ask, what happens if they retaliate? What's our next move if this doesn't work? Reyna paused, her eyes scanning the screen again. Her mind raced through possibilities. A direct assault on Earth was coming. They all knew it. But if the initial strike failed, Earth would be exposed, vulnerable. If they couldn't get ahead, if they couldn't blind the Council's communications, they would be crushed under the weight of superior forces. I don't know, Lila, Reyna said, her voice quiet for the first time. But we will find a way. We have to. She walked over to the viewport, her gaze drifting to the stars beyond. She wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival. She was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. The Galactic Council had made its stance clear, Earth wasn't welcome. But Reyna knew the truth. They couldn't be suppressed, not forever. Humanity's spirit, their relentless drive to overcome, would break through even the darkest of times. It always did. Her calm buzzed, snapping her back to the present. Reyna, Lila's voice came through the line. We're in position. The window's closing. Reyna turned to the team. Do it. The countdown began. The minutes felt like hours, but they moved quickly. Each officer knew their role, and they carried it out with precision. Reyna stood still, watching the clock tick down, her chest tight. This was the moment that would determine everything. 10 seconds, Lila called out. Reyna gripped the edge of the table, her breath steady but heavy. The tension was palpable. This was more than just a battle, it was a statement. Earth wouldn't back down. Earth wouldn't surrender. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. 5, 4, 3. The sound of engines roaring to life and weapons charging flooded the command center. The fleet was in motion. Launch! Reyna commanded. The first salvo of missiles shot into the void, aimed straight for the Council surveillance satellites. Reyna watched the monitors, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle had begun. Chapter 3. The stars outside seemed to freeze for a moment, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The initial salvo had struck true. Earth's missiles had found their targets, disabling the Council's surveillance satellites with surgical precision. For a brief moment, Reyna allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. The window was open. Now they just needed to make the most of it. First wave successful, Lila's voice crackled through the comms. Surveillance is down. They won't see us coming. Reyna allowed herself a single nod, but there was no time to relax. The Council's fleet was still out there, and it wouldn't stay blind for long. She turned to Tannen, who was standing nearby, his face hard as he stared at the holographic battlefield in front of him. We have minutes before they regain full communications, she said. We need to move now. Hit their smaller vessels. Keep them on the defensive. Don't let them regroup. Tannen's lips pressed together in a tight line, but he didn't argue. The choice was already made. Commander Hayes, activate the fleet, he barked. Focus on the light cruisers. Take out their engines, disable their firepower. Don't engage their capital ships yet. Aye, General, came the quick reply from the fleet's command officer. Reyna watched as the tactical map shifted. The fleet had split into groups, each moving toward a different target. She could see the trajectories of the ships, the path they would take toward the Council's smaller vessels. Their movements were calculated, but even with Earth's improved weapons, they were still outmatched. Reyna, I need to ask, Lila said, her voice low but filled with the same anxiety Reyna was trying to suppress. What if we fail? What happens when they come back with everything? Reyna paused, her gaze fixed on the holographic map. The Council's forces were already regrouping, sending out smaller ships to intercept the first wave of Earth's fleet. It was only a matter of time before the main force arrived. We don't fail, Reyna said quietly. Failure isn't an option. She turned back to the monitors, her mind calculating the best course of action. The smaller Council ships were already closing in, and their weapons, though weaker, could still cause serious damage to Earth's untested fleet. Reyna had expected the first wave to be only a distraction, but now the real fight had begun. She had no illusions about what was coming. They had poked the hornet's nest, and the hornets were angry. The first shots rang out, distant at first, but then rapidly growing closer. Earth's ships fired back, the bright streaks of energy lighting up the blackness of space. Reyna felt the tremor in the air as the ship beneath her feet shook slightly, a reminder that they, too, were vulnerable. The fleet's shields flared as incoming fire struck. A burst of static exploded on her comm, and a voice cut through. "Reyna, we're taking hits. Shields are holding, but not for long. We need backup." She didn't hesitate. "Form up. Starboard side now," Reyna ordered. "All ships, engage evasive maneuvers. We need to draw their fire." The fleet split, some ships darting in sharp arcs while others engaged the enemy head-on. Reyna could feel the pressure of the battle mounting as the Council's forces began to fight back with increasing ferocity. Her tactical display flickered as reports flooded in, damage reports, enemy movements, ships falling out of formation. The situation was slipping, and Reyna had to act fast before it all fell apart. "Hayes, status," Reyna demanded. "Damn it," came Hayes' voice, strained. "We've lost 2 frigates in the outer quadrant. They're out of range. We're trying to compensate, but they're too fast." "Switch to the intercept course," Reyna snapped. "Don't let them isolate us. Keep the formation tight." The tension in her chest tightened, and Reyna clenched her fists. The first round had been successful, but the real fight was here. The Council ships were not only better equipped, but they were organized. Unlike Earth's scattered fleet, their forces were unified, their tactics honed over centuries. Yet, as Reyna observed the fleet's movements, a thought settled in her mind. The Council had their advantages, but they underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to think outside the box. They could still win this, if only they could keep the pressure on. "We've got one chance," Reyna muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the unfolding battle. "If we don't break them now, we'll never get another shot." Suddenly, a new alert popped up on her screen, an incoming fleet. Larger ships, emerging from a nearby jump point. Reyna's heart skipped a beat. The Council wasn't sending a warning anymore. This was the main force. "Damn it!" she swore under her breath. "They're here." Lila's voice came through just as sharply. "We have to retreat, Reyna. We can't fight this force." "Not yet." Reyna's mind raced. They had the element of surprise, but that would only last so long. The Council's reinforcements were too strong. But she knew that retreat was just another word for surrender. And Reyna Ford didn't surrender. Not when humanity's future was on the line. "Split the fleet," she commanded. "A third will keep the smaller ships distracted. The rest will draw their attention. We'll pull them off course. It's risky, but it'll buy us time." The tactical map shifted again. Her orders were carried out in real time. Ships broke away from the formation, launching themselves into the fray. The Council ships, momentarily confused by the unexpected shift, hesitated, allowing Earth's fleet to land several well-placed strikes on the smaller vessels. A few exploded in bursts of light, but the damage didn't last long. "We're running out of time, Reyna," Lila warned. "I know," Reyna snapped. "Trust me, we're buying time, not for ourselves, but for Earth. For humanity." The battle was now a chaotic dance of light and explosions, a deadly game of cat and mouse. Reyna's stomach twisted as she watched Earth's ships take heavy damage, but she refused to let fear consume her. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their place in the galaxy. As the seconds stretched into eternity, Reyna steadied herself. The Council's reinforcements were overwhelming, but Earth was not backing down. They couldn't afford to. Not now, not ever. Chapter 4 Divided Earth. Reyna stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the tactical map that hovered in front of her. The space battle raged outside the atmosphere, but inside the walls of Earth's leadership quarters, the situation was growing more complicated by the hour. Despite the initial success, the battle had become a war of attrition, and Earth's fleet was running low on resources. The Council's reinforcements had arrived, and their advanced technology was beginning to tell. The very air felt heavy with the weight of decisions she didn't want to make. "Reyna," came a voice from behind her. General Tannen entered, his face lined with weariness. "We've lost 2 more ships. We're on the verge of a full retreat. The rest of the fleet can't hold out much longer." She didn't respond immediately. She knew the numbers. She felt the weight of every ship lost, every life that had been sacrificed for this fight. But retreat. Earth couldn't afford to retreat. Not now. Not after everything they'd been through. "What's the status on the ground?" she asked, her voice tight. Tannen hesitated. "There's unrest. Factions are starting to fracture. Some are calling for us to surrender before we lose more ships. They want to negotiate." The mention of negotiation made Reyna's blood run cold. The thought of Earth bowing to the Council's will, of bending in the face of defeat, was unacceptable. Her jaw clenched as she turned to face Tannen. "I'm not negotiating," she said firmly. "Earth stands on its own. We're not giving in to them." Tannen's brow furrowed as he took a step closer. "I get it, Reyna. I do. But people are scared. They're seeing the ships fall, the damage to our fleet. They're asking questions. They want you to tell them we can win this." A deep sigh escaped Reyna's lips. The truth was, she couldn't promise them victory. She didn't even know if they could win. What she did know was that surrendering would cost them everything. Earth's independence, their future, would be wiped out under the Council's heel. "We're not going to give up," she said, her voice unwavering. "But I need every leader on the same page. If we're divided now, we're finished. Get them here. Now." Tannen didn't argue. He turned and left the room, returning a few minutes later with the other members of Earth's Leadership Council. They were a diverse group: military commanders, political leaders, and influential figures from Earth's scientific community. The weight of their collective gaze was almost more than Reyna could bear. "We need to talk strategy, Reyna," said Dr. Evelyn Kwan, Earth's chief scientist and advisor. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held the same fear that plagued everyone in the room. "The enemy's fleet is overwhelming. We're on the edge of collapse." Reyna nodded, but the words didn't sit right. There was no room for defeat in her mind. "I know. But retreat isn't an option. Our only shot is to keep them on the defensive. We strike at their weak points, exploit their overconfidence." Commander Alistair Yoon, one of Reyna's most trusted officers, stepped forward. "We've tried that. Our ships are still outnumbered, and their technology is far beyond ours. They're picking us off one by one." Reyna turned to him, meeting his gaze with the same resolve she felt deep inside. "They think they can break us with numbers and firepower. But we have something they don't." "And what's that?" Yoon asked, a mix of skepticism and curiosity in his voice. "We have humanity's will," Reyna replied, her voice hardening. "We adapt. We survive. It's what we do. We don't fight like the Council. We fight smarter. We fight with everything we have." The room was silent for a moment as everyone processed her words. Reyna could feel the weight of their doubt pressing in, but she refused to back down. She had led them this far. She wasn't going to falter now. "I'm not asking for miracles," she continued. "I'm asking for one last push. We'll divide their forces, split them up. If we can draw them into a long-range battle, we can wear them down. We'll go after their support ships, anything we can hit." Dr. Kwan spoke up again, her voice barely above a whisper. "And if that doesn't work? If we can't hold them off?" Reyna didn't hesitate. "Then we'll die fighting." A long pause followed. The harsh truth hung in the air. Reyna watched as the leaders exchanged glances, fear and determination battling behind their eyes. Then, one by one, they nodded. "We're with you," General Tannen said, his voice quiet but resolute. "We'll push forward." "Good," Reyna said, her tone now a bit softer. She felt the weight of the moment, the responsibility she had taken on. But she knew there was no turning back now. Earth's future rested on their shoulders, and she would not let them fall. Minutes later, the tactical map was once again filled with markers showing Earth's fleet in motion. Reyna had given her final orders. They would split into two groups. The first group would continue to engage the smaller vessels, buying time while the second group moved in for a more direct attack on the Council support ships, those that maintained their logistics and supply lines. "Status report," Reyna demanded, standing at the heart of the command center, her eyes scanning the monitors. "Group 1 is holding steady," Lieutenant Torres responded. "But we've lost another frigate. Shields are failing across the board. The Council's main fleet is closing in. Reyna's heart sank as the numbers flashed across the screen. Every ship lost was a blow to Earth's chances, but it wasn't over yet. Not as long as they still had fighters in the air and firepower to use. "Group 2, are you in position?" she asked, her eyes darting to the map showing the movement of the second fleet. "We're approaching their support ships now," Yoon's voice came back. "Firing in 10 seconds. "Do it," Reyna ordered. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like a lifetime. Then, the first barrage of missiles lit up the screen. Earth's ships had begun their final assault on the Council's weakest link. For the first time in hours, Reyna felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. The Council support ships began to falter, their shields buckling under the pressure. But the fight was far from over. "Report from Group 1, Tannen's voice cut in. "The Council's capital ships are closing in. We don't have much time." Reyna's eyes flicked to the battle. The clock was ticking, but Earth was not done yet. Not by a long shot. She would not let Earth fall, not while she still had the power to fight back. Chapter 5. The battle raged outside Earth's atmosphere, a storm of fire and fury, but inside the command center there was a cold calm. Reyna stood, her eyes locked onto the holographic display, watching as Earth's fleet continued to fight, each ship a flickering point of resistance against the vast, overwhelming power of the Galactic Council. "Status report." Reyna's voice cut through the low hum of the command center, sharp and controlled. "Group 2's assault on the supply ships is successful," Lila reported, her voice filled with strained relief. "But Group 1 is taking heavy hits. The Council's capital ships are closing in." Reyna's jaw tightened. The Council had committed its full force, sending in the largest and most heavily armed ships Earth had ever faced. It was their last move to break Earth's resolve. But Reyna refused to let it be their final blow. "Commander Yoon, how's Group 1? Reyna asked, turning toward the communication officer, her gaze intense. "We're losing ships," came Yoon's strained response. "They're outgunned. Shields are failing across the fleet. We can't hold much longer, Reyna." Reyna felt the weight of those words. She could feel it in her bones. Her people, her fleet, were on the verge of collapse. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, something stirred in her, a flicker of the hope she had fought so hard to keep alive. Earth had always been underestimated by the galaxy. They had always been seen as a minor player in the grand scheme of things. But now, they had a chance to prove something more, to show the Council that humanity would never bow to their will. "We're not retreating," she said firmly, turning to face her commanders. "We fight to the end. We've pushed them back before, and we'll do it again. This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about making the Council understand who we are." General Tannen, who had been watching the battle from his station, nodded grimly. "Reyna's right. We don't back down now. We make them regret underestimating Earth." The words hit her like a wave of energy. They had fought too hard to lose now. The stakes were clear, but Reyna wasn't going to let her people die without a chance, without a final stand that would be remembered by every civilization in the galaxy. "We need to go all in," Reyna continued. "Get Group 1 to regroup and charge. We'll hit their capital ships head-on." Tannen looked at her, his brow furrowing in concern. "Reyna, that's a suicide mission. We've got no backup." "We don't need backup," Reyna replied. "We just need resolve. We take the fight to them. And we don't stop until we've broken their lines." For a moment, there was a tense silence. Then, slowly, the commanders nodded. They knew the risks, but they also knew that Reyna's words were true. Earth's best chance was to strike before the Council had time to consolidate its advantage. The fleet's commanders sprang into action, relaying orders to their ships. The tactical map shifted again, showing a realignment of Earth's fleet. Reyna's heart raced as she watched the ships in real time. Earth's forces were weak, battered by hours of constant battle. But there was fire in their eyes. They would give everything. "Group 1 is repositioning," Lila said, her fingers flying over the controls. "They'll be in range of the Council's flagship in 5 minutes." Reyna stood at the viewport, watching as Earth's fleet braced itself for the final engagement. The Council's flagship loomed ahead, an immense ship bristling with weapons, its shields glowing with raw power. The odds were impossible. The enemy was too strong, too well-equipped. But Reyna had always believed that the heart of humanity could withstand anything. A message flashed on the screen. It was from Tovar Vex, the Supreme Overseer of the Galactic Council. The words were simple, cold: surrender or be annihilated. Reyna's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She was done negotiating. Done begging for mercy. Earth's only path forward was through this fight, and if they were going to lose, they would lose on their terms. Response? Lila asked, glancing at her. Reyna's lips curled into a grim smile. Send them a message. Lila's hands moved swiftly, and the reply flashed across the screen. We do not surrender. We fight. Minutes later, Earth's fleet had closed in on the Council's flagship. The final battle had begun. Fire everything! Reyna's voice rang out, commanding, unwavering. The fleet erupted into action. Missiles and energy blasts streaked across the black expanse of space, racing toward their targets. The Council's flagship fired back, massive beams of light cutting through the void. Earth's fleet scrambled to evade, but it was clear that the Council's technology was superior. The first wave of missiles slammed into the flagship's shields, sending shockwaves through the fleet. Earth's ships circled, desperately dodging return fire. Shields are failing. Yunt's voice crackled over the comms. We need to regroup or we'll be torn apart. Reyna's eyes remained fixed on the tactical map, watching as ships blinked out of existence. One by one, Earth's fleet was being dismantled, but still, they fought. We don't stop, Reyna shouted. We push forward. Her orders were met with resolve, with defiance. The smaller ships from Earth's fleet swarmed the Council's flagship, launching missile after missile, distracting its weapon systems and forcing its commanders to divide their attention. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had left. A deafening roar shook the command center as the flagship's shields flickered, then failed. For the first time in hours, Earth's forces were making progress. Direct hit, Lila cried. We've breached their main hull. The flagship's taking damage. Reyna's heart skipped a beat. This was it. They had a chance. The Council's flagship began to break apart, sparks of energy flaring as critical systems failed. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Council ships circled like predators, relentless, seeking to tear apart what was left of Earth's fleet. Earth's forces were battered, but the resolve of Reyna's leadership kept them focused. They fought with everything they had. And then, just as hope seemed to flicker out, the Council fleet's formation shifted. A ripple of confusion spread through their lines. The remaining Earth ships, still reeling from the damage, made a desperate last push. Their missiles found targets with deadly accuracy. One by one, the remaining Council ships fell, their shields too weak to withstand the barrage. The flagship exploded in a massive burst of light, the energy radiating out across space. A cheer erupted through Earth's fleet, the sound of triumph mingling with the static of the comms. Reyna closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle over her. The battle was over. They had won. But it had come at a cost. The losses were heavy, too heavy to count. And yet, as she looked out at the stars, she knew one thing for certain: Earth was no longer a footnote in the galaxy. They had carved their place in history. The fight for humanity's future had just begun.